Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Ashland Climate Action Project of Southern Oregon Climate Action Now, welcome to the 2020 Ashland Climate Voter Project. My name is Lori Kaplan, and I've been the coordinator for this event. Before we get started, I'd just like to acknowledge that we've all experienced such tragedy and grief this past week, but we also see the incredible effort that's going on to assist our neighbors. I hope that everyone here on the call tonight is safe. And just in the spirit of our coming together and our recovery, I'd like to encourage us to approach this program with what I'm going to call radical positivity. I want to encourage you to use the chat function of the Zoom webinar, and you can, when you do that, make sure you choose to go to all attendees and panelists, because otherwise it just goes to the panelists, those of us that you see here on the screen. I'd love for you to just share positive messages and thanks along the way as kind of cheering on and in the spirit of radical positivity, because, you know, it takes great courage to run for public office. And so I want to thank our candidates for being here and for taking the step of public service. It's a really important thing and big deal. So I just want to go over a couple rules before we get going. All the questions have been sent to the candidates in advance. So there won't be any live questions tonight or back and forth or follow-up. We'll be timing the responses so everyone has the same time to respond. And we're going to alternate who goes first on each question. And that is, I think, the rules. So with no further ado, I would like to introduce our moderator for this evening. We're thrilled to have Barrett O'Brien here with us again this evening. He's a local theater artist and climate activist. Thank you, Barrett, and for being the moderator.
Thank you so much for inviting me to do that. It's such an honor to be here with all of you. I want to just begin by shouting out to our participants who many of whom were here for our city council webinar as well. And I think that in a time when a tweet or a soundbite can be mistaken for a deeply considered dynamic piece of public policy, having a base of voting citizens who are active and engaged and curious is such a deep blessing and a must, really, as we step into our bright future together. So I thank you for being here. I thank you for being witness and standing in witness. And I invite you to use that chat room during the call to celebrate things, ask questions, and also during the question and answer period, we'll stop a few times to have polls where you guys can contribute. And also to shout out to people who will be watching this later on the recorded version. Your time is important and your curiosity is important, so thank you. Like Lori said, my name is Barrett O'Brien. I'm an artist and a teacher. I'm a parent. I'm a SOCAN member. I am a resident of Ashland. And to that end, I want to begin by acknowledging that the community of Ashland is built on the traditional homelands of the Shasta, Takelma, and Klamath Basin peoples. And it is our privilege and honor to continue collaborating with them on their millennia-long stewardship of this exquisite piece of earth. The choices that we make in the coming years are going to have tremendous impact on the livability of this valley and on the world. And finally, thank you to Tonya Graham and Julie Akins for your time, for deeming it important enough to be with us and answer these questions, these detailed questions. As the late Wayne Dyer says, that in politics, no one is ever running against an opponent. They are running for what they believe in. And it is an honor to be a very small part of helping to get Julie and Tonya's beliefs out to the Ashland community. So it's an honor to be here and be a small part of this. So as Lori said, we'll have questions. We have 9 questions. We'll do it alternating who goes first and second on answering questions. The answers are brief. We don't have a lot of time, so their tastes of answers, right? As we get to know our candidates over the next few weeks and months. So if you decide you don't feel like you have to use the whole 2 minutes every time, give Julie your time. If you feel like you've answered, that's totally fine too. So, but towards the end of that time, Lori will hold up our 10 seconds remaining sign just to keep us on target so that it's a really digestible webinar that people can watch and rewatch and come back to. So that's the goal with that. So what we're going to start is with some opening remarks. And we'll have Julie go first and just introduce yourselves and begin the evening.
Thank you very much. Great privilege to be here with all of you this evening. And I think it goes without saying at this point, I'm sitting, actually, I'm not at my house. I'm not able to be there right now. I'm sorry if there's noise in the background, but I'm looking out the window and it's still very smoky here in Medford. I think the largest existential threat to our planet and our local community is climate change. If anyone was not convinced of that a moment before, I think they're convinced of it now. And clearly everything we do has to go toward that effort. And I appreciate the opportunity to answer these questions because they are so vital and so important and affect the quality of our lives and our lives of our children and grandchildren. I thank you for the territorial acknowledgement. I was gifted the opportunity to work on policy with Loma Katsi Restoration Project and spent many hours in a car with Belinda Brown, the Tribal Partnerships Manager. And we went around the territorial region and talked to our Native elders about indigenous burning and other practices that had been done here for years and years, for generations prior to colonization. And there's a lot of wisdom there. I appreciate you bringing that forward. It's vital. I think really the question has to be, first of all, how do we keep our community safe as we can at this time? How do we figure out how to house people in a safe way? Because I think it's clear that we're going to have more fires. I wish that wasn't true, but if you look at the climate maps, it's clear that we're heading toward desertification up the West Coast, and we have to start thinking about how we're going to live with that and with drought. And so these are very important subjects. I think it's important that people are clear that their leadership is going to provide them with solid evacuation plans, with continued leadership around how to make their homes defensible and safe. And I appreciate the opportunity to have this dialogue this evening.
Thank you, Julie. Tonya? You're muted still.
Thank you, SoCan. Thank you, Barrett and Lori, for putting this on tonight. It's such an incredibly important issue. As you all know, if you're on this call, you already know that the climate change crisis is the greatest existential threat ever faced by humanity. Julie and I absolutely agree on that. We also only have less than 10 years to turn it around. And so many of you, I'm sure, have seen the IPCC warning from 2018 that said that we have to reduce our net emissions of carbon dioxide by 45% of 2010 levels by 2030. And it is already 2020. And so we know where we're at in terms of that timeline. Essentially, we need to hit these marks to avoid runaway climate change. And our response to the climate crisis has to include both reducing greenhouse gas emissions while adapting to the impacts of climate change that we have already set in motion and that will continue to accelerate over all of our lifetimes. So a little bit about me. I serve as the executive director of the GEOS Institute, where I have focused on helping communities adapt to climate change for the past 12 years. Our ClimateWise team helps communities adapt to climate change by sharing future climate projections and taking them through a process that we developed that's called whole community adaptation. And through this process, communities develop climate solutions that are both ecologically sound and socially equitable. And both of those things are very, very important when we look at how we respond to climate change. And finally, our team created the Climate Ready Communities Program, which is an assisted do-it-yourself kind of program, climate resilience planning program, to help communities that are either cash-strapped or just so small that they don't have the money to afford a consultant. And that's where local government is really where this is happening right now, where the important work is being done.
Thank you, guys. So we'll jump into question number one. Very pertinent question. Fire safety and risk reduction. So for those watching in the future, tonight's attendees have sent us their questions about fire, which we then forwarded to the candidates so they could go through the questions and find ones that spoke to them or they wanted to speak to. So they're going to respond to a few of those questions that resonated with them and that they wanted to speak to. Tonya, would you go first on that one, please?
So when we talk about wildfire, it's important to remember that there are three things that drive wildfire: weather, fuels, and topography. We can't do anything about topography, but climate change is creating more extreme fire weather. And so we need to be ready for a future with more wildfire. And along with addressing the cause of climate change, which of course impacts what the weather is likely to be, we have to face this increasing risk of wildfire by addressing fuels in the wildlands near town and making sure that structures don't ignite easily. Wildfires, as we saw last week, can send embers out several miles ahead of the fire front. And so we need to worry about those embers catching structures on fire, even when the fire hasn't gotten to them. The city's role is to partner with agencies to reduce fuels in the watershed and to assist residents in doing the work they need to do around their homes. The city right now has strong programs for both of those efforts and does a really good job of enforcing the weed ordinance and the other things that we have on the books. We actually have in Ashland the largest percentage of Firewise communities in the country, and we offer free Firewise inspections so that people know what they need to do around their house to reduce their risk. We've applied for a $4 million grant to help the 1,100 highest risk homes from FEMA. But generally the city can't afford to do this work for homeowners. They can help us know what to do, but it's really our responsibility to reduce the risk around our homes. The city is developing a program with realtors to reduce fire risk when homes sell, which is often when there's money available to do some of the work. And the council has directed staff to assess our streets to make sure that we have enough evacuation routes in different fire scenarios. And so that's a really important part of this too that came up in the conversation last week of, what do our streets look like if fire starts in different parts? There was also a question about emergency communications, and our system Nixle offers basic communication in an emergency, and it worked in many ways, but we don't have a staff person whose entire focus is communications in an emergency, and that's a problem. And so we didn't see the kind of follow-up communication that we might have expected. In terms of what's happening about it, I'm bringing forward an agenda item to council where we'll discuss directing staff to put the communication position back into the budget for the upcoming budget cycle. And I've also put forward a proposal with Councillor Jensen for a regular e-news that would help Ashlanders be better informed in general and could be published daily in the event of an emergency.
Thank you for your answer. Julie, please.
Okay, there I am. Thank you for that. Yes, I'm really interested in the communication piece myself. I think as mayor, it would be my job to be a communications person and let people know what's going on and let them know in real time what's happening. That's actually my background. For 30 years, I was in the news business. And I was on deck on September 11th and led our entire community, which at that time was Las Vegas, Nevada, in constant real-time updates as things were unfolding. And that's really what we needed in this situation, is much higher levels of communication. And I would do that a variety of ways, including, on the coast, they have these tsunami warnings. They actually have these warnings that go out that let people know there's an urgent situation, and then they let people know where they can get information. And I think we could employ something like that. I think that people need updates constantly through social media. I think they need road signs that tell them exactly where to evacuate, because receiving a Nixle alert that says to evacuate isn't enough. You have to know where you're going, and you have to know how much time you have. We have a CERT program and it wasn't activated, and we need to be really careful to make sure that we activate all the systems that we have and we know what's going on. There's an active conversation around what happened last time with semi-trucks being diverted through town, which created a terrible amount of gridlock. And we need to make sure that doesn't happen again. I'm the liaison to the Transportation Commission, and I've asked them to make this their #1 priority, to start getting some ideas together to have better evacuation plans, because that was a really frightening situation and communication was not adequate. I agree with Councillor Graham on that. I also agree regarding hard homes. We need to be thinking about ways so that our defensible space in our homes are made of harder surfaces. Right now, this entire region will be needing to rebuild homes, and we can do this better. we can make them more Firewise. We can make their structures stronger and more resistant to fire. And we can work together also to have smaller footprint homes, which I personally work on for unhoused people. And I think we can use some of the models that I've received in energy efficiency and also making them safer. So those are some priorities I would have as well.
Thank you. So Lori has put together a couple of polls for us, which are super fun. I don't know why they're so fun. Something about clicking a bubble is so fun to me. So I thought this might be a nice time just to allow our candidates to have a little sip of water while Lori leads us through a poll. Do you have one for us, Lori?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Barrett, and thank you, Julie and Tonya. Okay, I am going to launch the first poll, and everyone can vote anonymously. And it's just to test your knowledge about climate issues, just for fun.
Including us, right? We can, the panelists, we can all vote. Right.
Yeah, including us. Here we go. Which of the following greenhouse gases has the highest global warming potential? And global warming potential is a kind of a universal concept to help us, gauge our impact on global warming. So our choices are hydrogen, carbon, methane, or none of the above.
So Lori, after everybody votes, could you wait to show the graphs till after question 2?
Yes, that will give us a little that feeling of anticipation.
All right, great. So we'll go to question 2, and then Lori will share with us the results of how informed we are. I'm pretty sure I was wrong. As I clicked it, I'm like, that feels wrong. So I think I might be one of the wrong. Question number 2, you guys. Is the city on target in hitting the goals of the 2017 Ashland Climate Energy Action Plan, known as the SEEP? Given the city's fiscal challenges, how would you, as mayor, ensure that the city fully implements the SEEP in its own operations and in the community? So Julie, I'd like you to go first on this one, please.
Certainly, thank you. Well, despite the sincere resident engagement in climate issues, Ashland has not been able to keep pace with our goals. Ashland has not achieved the 8% emission reductions called for in SEEP, and that's according to our progress report that was issued in 2019. To be fair, we've had a change in priorities federally, which does make that more difficult, as you can imagine. Tax breaks, grants, and regulatory demands have been curtailed in the current administration, and those things roll downhill. We're all connected in this way. We have made progress in building an architecture, and the surrounding forest and the urban interface is healthier through strategic thinning and burning. That's the work that I spoke to earlier that Lomakatsi does with the AFR. We continue to explore transportation issues, which could be improved. We used to subsidize our bus fares, and I'd like to find a way to get back to that and get more people on buses and in mass transportation. We could offer those free rides. I had this idea that we could also help our Uber and Lyft drivers by, if they have a hybrid or an electric car, we could offer them a price break on their licensing, and we could let riders know that they're being picked up in an electric car and do some encouragement and help there. We could offer incentives to electric bike buyers and electric car purchasers. We have $300,000 as a result of our ability to purchase electric vehicles. That's great. We did a good job, and we could encourage that and do more. So I'd like to give some of that back to people who purchase electric vehicles and bikes, because they're actually quite expensive still and not accessible to a lot of folks. So we could do what we could to help them. We could partner with local energy developers and inventors. We have some amazing people in this town. Have you guys seen Brett Beeland's scooter that goes around town? He's got a solar powered scooter. It's the most amazing thing. We could start working with some of these people to innovate. I think climate change answers come in mixed models, and every small step leads to larger steps, and we could do that together.
Thank you. Tonya? So diligent. You're so wonderfully diligent with that mute.
I have dogs and children in the house, so. So SEEP is generally a strong plan with solid targets that align with what we need to do globally. But unfortunately, it took quite a bit of time to get from passing the ordinance to hiring staff and then creating the strategic, the commission structure that would help with that. We are making progress. So during the update in April of this year, staff came forward and reported that out of the 65 adopted actions, 6 are complete, 27 are in process or being executed, 10 are in planning, 12 are being initiated or researched, and 10 have not yet been started. And so there is an active effort to move through those elements and to implement them, but we are not where we need to be. And the SEEP includes many actions that have to be taken up by the larger community to be implemented. So not all of this can happen just at the city level. We do have an AmeriCorps intern who's just started, and she's going to be assisting with strengthening the web presence for SEEP so that residents and businesses can know how they can help. And then, of course, the Conservation and Climate Outreach Commission is also starting to meet again and is working on all of that. So I was asked to chair the Climate Policy Commission for the first 12 months to help get it started. And just prior to COVID, we were bringing a list of governance actions to the council to consider. And then COVID happened and the commission couldn't meet for several months. And so we're now meeting again, and we were bringing some of those elements forward and planning to have a variety of policies coming forward to move SEEP forward faster than it has been.
Thank you. Wonderful. Lori, do you have some results from us for our first poll?
In fact, I do, Barrett. I'm going to share the results.
Please.
And the answer is methane. However, some clever people, I think, realize that this could be seen as an ambiguous question because of the ones listed here, methane, it has the highest global warming potential. It, in fact, is estimated to have 28 to, I shouldn't even do those numbers. I'm not going to do it. But there is one that's worse, which is nitrous oxide. So, yeah.
Wow.
So methane is bad. Methane, we talk about, you know, carbon, reducing our carbon footprint. Methane is actually worse.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on to question 3. And Tonya, I'd love you to answer this one first, please. What 3 specific things would you do as mayor to make Ashland more environmentally sustainable while promoting economic and social resilience?
So we need, as a community, a strategic plan that is built around social, economic, and climate resilience. And we don't have that yet. So as mayor, I would lead the city of Ashland in developing that plan. And for economic resilience, that means developing a plan for our economy that's resilient to all of these things that we've been seeing recently: fire, smoke, drought, extreme heat. I would continue to build on the social equity and racial justice resolution recently passed by council so that Ashland can keep moving towards greater social resilience. And then in terms of climate resilience, the focus needs to be on implementing the SEEP and transitioning from fossil fuels to electricity, increasing renewable energy, and strengthening the adaptation elements of SEEP. So that's where we get into wildfire preparation and heat wave issues and that sort of thing. Unfortunately, there's quite a lot of overlap between these different elements of resilience. And so, for instance, if you're building climate resilience by implementing renewable energy, it's also an economic resilience strategy. And there are lots of places where these pieces can come together. And efforts to improve climate and economic resilience can and should focus investment on improving the lives of low-income residents. So we can actually even bring that social aspect in as we're working on these other pieces. But we need a strategic plan that's clear about what we're trying to accomplish.
Thank you.
And then we need to implement it.
All right. Julie.
Thank you. Yes, implementation has been a bit of a bugaboo in the city of Ashland. We do a good job of planning things and talking about them, but we don't always do a good job of doing them. So I completely agree that once we have a plan, we need to actually enact it. We've spent a lot of time making plans, and I'd like to see us move forward. I think the first thing is we have to use every opportunity afforded to us that's already been afforded to us. All policy and practice has to take fire into consideration. Defensible space, resistant housing. This becomes a source of incomes and jobs. That's job 1. And I think that could be helpful to lower income folks as well. We had a chance to put a small solar array in at no cost on the Imperatrice property. It was submitted by a local solar energy company. That installation would then be used to power aspects of the property to bring it closer toward restoration. There's some endangered species up there, and there are day hikers who appreciate that property. We instead gave it up for cattle grazing. Missed opportunities like that prevent greater progress, and we need to be more careful. Secondly, again, I'm talking about small things because this is how nature works. It works with small things to create big change. Secondly, micro dams on smaller creeks and waterways can be used to generate energy to power a pump for irrigation, or the power can be used for lighting, electric fencing, any number of ways to pull some power off of the grid. I've seen this to great impact in parts of California, in areas that have been impacted by fire due to power outages, and these are good things. Straw bale construction needs to be part of our practice. Straw bale construction is entirely sustainable, biodegradable, using what's left over from farmers to create aesthetically beautiful and inexpensive homes, and this is important. Affordability is something we have a big problem with. So it's something used around other parts of Oregon and can be part of our building as well. So innovation, 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 that's how we're gonna do it.
Thank you. And thank you for using the phrase bugaboo. I haven't heard anybody use that in a long time. I appreciate that. Question 4. What 3 things would you do as mayor to help bring green jobs to Ashland? Julie, would you go first, please?
Yes. Okay, mute button, there we are. Well, the answer is we actually have green jobs in Ashland, and the folks who are already here need our help to expand and to provide even more of those good jobs, living wage jobs. Blue Marble is an example. The good folks there are local brothers who grew up in Ashland. They make green and instructional educational toys for National Geographic. They have 50 living wage jobs, and they want to double that. What's holding them back is not enough buildable space. So they'd like to buy the soon-to-be abandoned B Street yard, but they haven't been able to even get a tour of that property from the city. We need to do better on helping people who are trying to help us. It's the same thing with 2 of our solar employers who have not been hired by the city to do evaluations, consulting, or building. When we have jobs, we need to give them to our local folks first, who are doing a good job and could have, I think, achieved good results. So we have to hire local green employers first. And finally, to bring green employers here, we have to offer reasonable building lots. The Croman Mills property comes to mind. It's ideal for building, except the demands the city places are so stringent, it just doesn't pencil out for anybody. Let's create an atmosphere for green living wage employers who are here and who want to come here.
Thank you. Tonya?
So the green economy, we do already have aspects of it. We have a couple of great solar energy folks, and I've met with the Blue Marble folks as well. We need to make sure that when they get to a certain level of success, that they don't have to leave Ashland in order to keep their business growing. That's absolutely clear. That's a zoning and a lands issue that the city has a lot of control over. Renewable energy is another big part of this. So when we are encouraging renewable energy, when we have programs that help people put solar up or have larger installations, we're creating family wage jobs right there. But it also needs to be part of a larger structure and a plan. It can't just be one-offs and haphazard. We have to set about with clear goals around green energy and green jobs, and then put the pieces in place to make that happen. So when we're thinking about where do we allocate money, what kind of zoning do we put in place, we need to be clear about what that looks like in terms of our green jobs and how what we're actually trying to do to put those in place. And that means coordinating with our folks regionally with So Ready. It also means incorporating people who are already here and have businesses, the chamber. There are lots of efforts that are underway right now to re-envision Ashland's economy on a number of fronts, and green energy and green jobs have to be right at the center of that planning process. And the city is an important convener when we look at how we do that sort of planning. So the city has water to carry with this, but it needs its partners alongside of it.
Thank you for the phrase water to carry. You guys use I love the way you speak. As a linguist, I just love some of this language. Thanks to both of you. The next question is about walkability, bikeability. what 3 steps would you support as mayor to further develop a safe, walkable, bikeable infrastructure? Tonya, could you go first, please?
So transportation is a very important part of our climate work. The transportation system plan is in the process of being revised, and that's where decisions about walkability and bikeability will be made. They happen in master planning processes. The Climate Policy Commission is interacting with these revisions for all city systems, but the transportation system plan is a very important priority because we know the many benefits of creating a transportation system that is both bike and pedestrian friendly. Also, the revitalized downtown Ashland plan was underway, and it's been set aside for a while because of COVID and funding, but it needs to be a high priority given that downtown is such an important part of making Ashland a safer community for pedestrians and cyclists. Anybody who has pedaled through downtown Ashland knows that we have to work, that's a major part of where we have to work if we're going to make this the multimodal community we want to be. So as mayor, I would work to restart the revitalized downtown Ashland planning process and make sure that staff and the citizen commissions working on the transportation system plan are aware of the critical role that transportation planning plays in hitting our climate targets. And finally, as these plans are being developed, I would welcome individual policy ideas for how we move towards safer infrastructure right now before the plan is fully in place. There's no reason for us not to take action on good ideas before a master plan is in place. We need those good ideas, and people who are walking and biking right now already know them.
Julie.
Thank you. Yes, I think that anybody who rides a bike downtown sees the inconsistency. I think we need bike lanes to be consistent all the way through town. They cut in and cut out, and I've seen people almost get hit going through town. So making it more consistent in terms of bike lanes and bikeability would be important as well. I think we're a pretty walkable city, actually. I have a habit of walking from one tip to the other on the weekends. And I think we do a good job of making it a very walkable city. In fact, it's one of the reasons I moved to Ashland many years ago. But there are always things that we can do to do better with that. I have funny things like maybe some more benches and not with hostile architecture. One of my problems with the revitalized downtown project is that hostile architecture was part of that. Hostile architecture is those things which prevent people from lingering for long periods of time for fear that the unhoused will stay there. We need to move off of that and move on with making our town a comfortable place for everybody to be. So I would like to see that. I'd like to see our water fountains turned back on so that I could get water when I'm walking. These are small things that add up, again, to big differences. And of course, we need our plan to be clear and consistent and safe for everybody. I think we've done a pretty good job with this, but we can certainly do more. And we can talk about bike riding as being a big part of our new tourism economy. Now, of course, we're going to have to expand the way we think of our economic portfolio. We can't just be a tourist town. That's not going to work anymore. We need living wage employers that are year round. That said, a new part of tourism is our bikeability. Bike Magazine lists us every year as being a great place to bike, and there are tourists who come here for that purpose, and we have to make sure that it's a safe and attractive place for them.
Lovely, thank you. So Lori, do you have another poll we could do? I really am proud of myself for getting the last one right because I was convinced I got it wrong. So I'm
Hey, all right, you confess. Because you
my
got
batting
it.
average right now is really good. I'm going to see how I can do.
Okay, let's see how you do, Barrett. Okay, we're going to launch the next poll. You may notice a theme. What's the primary greenhouse gas emitted into the atmosphere when you use natural gas in your home for heating or for your gas stove for cooking or for your hot water heater?
Okay, so you can answer that as you're ready, and then Lori will come back at the end of the next question. We'll see what we can learn. You know, I guess it's not about how we did, right? We're just see what we can learn.
We're all in this
As
together.
I'm homeschooling with my daughter right now, I'm becoming better with my language about learning and growing.
There you go.
Yeah. Question number 6. Should the city continue to provide free Firewise audits, energy and water conservation incentives and audits, and solar installation incentives? What changes would you want to make to these programs, and how would these changes affect the city's ability to achieve our climate goals? Julie, please go first.
Thank you. Sorry, I had to get to the button with the notes and the buttons. It gets to be a lot going on. Well, certainly the answer to that is absolutely yes. I think now more than ever, this recent experience has made us understand the value of Firewise programs, and I appreciated Councilor Graham speaking to that earlier. Yes, I do support the continuation and expansion of Firewise. With the recent fires, as I say, it becomes more clear that defensible space around houses, fire-resistant landscapes, houses made of fire-resistant materials need to be the norm. Fire-resistant glass windows, brick construction, concrete with overlay to fit with community standards aesthetically is also important. We don't want to just become a concrete jungle, but we have to do this smart. All these things help slow fire and they save homes, or at least give people time to get out. I was looking at what they did in Sonoma County after the big fires down there, and you can see that in other communities that have been struck the way we just have been, they learned some things and they innovated and they moved forward in some interesting ways. And this one caught my attention. Rainwater collection actually can help as well. After the Santa Rosa fire, people started capturing rain, and they used it to keep their soil and plants moist, and they also used it to wet their roofs down as fire moved forward. As fire becomes imminent, rainwater collectors can be used to wet roofs and houses. Education and action combined help cities survive. We need to continue with our Firewise program. We need to move it forward and progress it, and we need to find ways to incentivize that for people across the economic spectrum, and for people who own homes where renters live, because a lot of the folks who lost everything in the fires were people who were renters, and they don't have any insurance and really any way to rebuild. So we need to have that in mind as we go forward in all these projects.
Tonya?
Yes, these programs have been very effective, and I would support continuing them. Funding is always a question, but some of these programs are housed in our enterprise fund, so they have somewhat consistent funding year over year. And when we talk about budget issues in our general fund, we're often not talking about the funding for these types of incentive programs. So staff right now is currently working to trade the clean energy credits that we've been earning for several years, and the goal is to reinvest those funds into programs that encourage residents to switch cars, homes, and businesses from fossil fuels to electricity. And those efforts in turn create more credits that can be sold to bring additional funding into the program. And so there's a nice synergy there that we can keep building on within our incentive programs. And then staff and the Climate Policy Commission are also working on grant funding from the USDA to kickstart a larger fund to help finance energy improvements for residents. And they're developing a plan to expand our on-bill financing program, where residents can easily borrow money to make improvements like changing to a heat pump and then pay them over time through their utility bill. So the fact that we own our own utility is a really important tool for moving these incentives forward. And then finally, there are many creative ways to go about helping residents make the right choices around energy. And if we design those properly, they also can help us meet the needs of low-income people, which furthers our social equity goals. And those people, everyone should be able to get the benefits of these incentive programs, but too often they really focus on helping people who don't need the help as much as other folks do. So we need to be careful how we create them.
Thank you, Tonya. Lori, how did we do on that poll? What did we learn?
What did we learn? Okay, well, the majority of attendees picked carbon, but the correct answer is methane. Remember, we just talked about methane too in the last question.
So when you use natural gas in your home, the outputted gas is methane.
Like with your gas stove. Mm-hmm.
My batting average just got sliced in half, but I learned something. Cool, thank you. Lori, while you're speaking, for those participants watching now, and if we want to tell people where to watch this webinar in the coming weeks, where would they go to watch this recording?
Did I never share results?
You do.
Okay, I thought I made a mistake. Where will they go, you ask?
Yeah, I do ask.
That's what you asked. SoCan, Southern Oregon Climate Action Now, has a YouTube channel. Well, we put stuff up on the SoCan website, but we also have a YouTube channel. And we hope to get those up by next week, once all of this, the whole series is completed. We'll get that up there and we'll share that link with everyone.
So if I want to tell someone to watch it, I can say, just go to socan.eco, and then the link will be there.
Yeah, they have different images on the front. And what ours is one of them. You'll see me on my bike with my helmet.
Great. So SoCan, SOCAN.ECO.
Oh, and I'll put that in the chat.
Great.
And
I already know people that are very excited to watch this. So.
Very excited. And you can go also to YouTube and just put in Southern Oregon Climate Action Now there. And they have all kinds of videos on there from our other recordings that we did for Pam Marsh and Terry Martin, Dave Daughter, other local candidates that people also need to be informed about.
Thank you, Lori, for all
Also
you
on
do.
climate issues. That's what we do.
Lori, you're so awesome. Thank you for all you do. So
You
much
are
is
too,
possible
Patty.
because of you. Thank you.
We're all so awesome. It's great. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, moving on. We're in the last 3 questions here. And this question is stated as such. Do you support taking steps to expand the use of solar power in Ashland in the coming years? If yes, what would be your approach to achieving this? Tonya, would you take this one first, please?
Sure. So I absolutely support expanding the use of solar power in Ashland. While we have some renewable energy limitations in our energy purchase agreement with Bonneville, it does allow us to develop a 1 megawatt solar project and as many other projects under 200 kilowatts as we want. And so there is plenty of work for us to be doing here locally. What we need to do first is to decide the best site for that larger project. And there's a proposal coming from our local solar co-op to put in a 1 megawatt project up at the wastewater treatment plant. The city owns quite a lot of property, and solar arrays can help us build resilience to emergencies like earthquakes, floods, and wildfire. That's one of the reasons that we should really be looking at this wastewater treatment plant site location. If we think of solar as energy production that can be pulled down into structures nearby in an emergency, then we can protect essential services like our emergency operations center, fire stations, the water and wastewater treatment plants, and other places that we need in an emergency. And so I would say we need to start there first. We need to build those arrays linked into our emergency and essential services. And the city has already taken important steps to encourage the use of solar. We've passed the net metering a while ago, which allows energy from panels in one location to be applied to the bill of a different property owner. And that opens up a lot of options. And going forward, what we need to do is to keep removing obstacles and keep partnering with local organizations to encourage more solar power generation in Ashland. The city has not done what it has needed to do on this in this regard. Absolutely. We should already have that 1 megawatt system up and running. But this is where our opportunity is. And we need to keep encouraging people to build solar.
Thank you. Julie?
Thank you. The Bonneville contract's actually coming up, so we need to be negotiating that now in order to produce more of our own energy. There is some wiggle room there, and we need to be exploring that. And we have to be careful about how we spend our money. I absolutely agree that we need more solar and we need more clean energy in the city of Ashland, but we have to be careful about how we go about that. We can't afford to raise utility fees anymore for people. That's an equity issue, and it's got to be off the table. We're maxed out on our property taxes as well. So as we go about this, it has to be careful, it has to be clear, and it can't cost our stakeholders and our residents more money. Solar is among the answers we need to look at. It's not the only source of clean energy, as we know. We need to additionally explore wind and hydro in the form of non-fish harming methods that don't increase water temperatures. There are things like swales that hold water and recharge systems. There are sustainable building practices, such as passive solar. As I mentioned earlier, straw bale. There are ways to build homes so that they're energy efficient and effective, and help people who are low income so their utility bills don't skyrocket. I favor mixed use. It winds up being more practical and economical. But as to solar itself, we do have local solar companies. Let's support them in their work with city contracts, with collaborating on moving our community forward through grant seeking and passing the money downstream locally to our Ashland solar businesses. Let's also figure out how to offer grants to renters for small movable solar. I'm very excited by this, and I'm seeing that this is becoming more available and more online for people. I'm constantly pricing them for our homes that we build for low-income folks, because we want to make sure that those are eco-nests and they're friendly to the environment. And there's some very exciting small solar arrays that you can actually put on houses at low cost. So let's keep doing that. And then let's also make it really exciting for people to consider this. Technology is constantly changing. To work with nature, you have to think like nature. That means nothing goes to waste and small changes matter.
Question number 8. What 3 strategies or programs could the city implement to make climate action more affordable to renters or low-income residents? I've heard a little bit about this throughout the evening, and it's wonderful to get a whole question dedicated to it. So, Julie, can you lead us off on question 8, please?
Yeah, sure. I think when you're talking about low-income folks and making things more affordable, we need to talk, we tend to go down the same roads over and over, which is like grants for them to fix up their homes, you know, and things in that area. And I think they do make sense, but it's not the only way. And those things are becoming more scarce, as we mentioned, because our federal government is no longer supporting those things in the way that it once did. So I'm going to throw out some interesting ideas here. We'll see how you guys pick these up. A huge source of greenhouse gases is consumption of new goods shipped here by truck. When you look at the pie chart, it's actually consumption that's a big part of our greenhouse gas issue. So I actually think that we should create a stronger local producing economy for items that can be produced and purchased locally. As mayor, that would be a big job for me. I will be working with our local living wage employers who are green energy minded and produce locally, and I will encourage more of them. More living wage jobs brings the cost down. Food production and shipping is a huge GHG emission problem. Offer public spaces and parks for community gardens and growing. Incentivize local farmers who are producing food on a larger scale, and support healthy organic diets while we're at it. I got to put a plug in here. We talked about methane. The United Nations talked about this years ago. A big problem with climate change is methane. That's from factory farming. So we need to be encouraging people to eat differently, to make different consumer choices. Don't worry, I'm not going to take your hamburger out of your hand, but we do need to be thinking about things and incentivizing things that are real to climate change. Solar is not the only answer. So plant-based diets are good for the planet. Water consumption, thousands of acres of a single crop like corn to feed farmed animals, it doesn't work. So as your mayor, my idea is going to be encouraging all of these different mixed uses and being very careful with how we move in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Tonya?
Yeah, social equity is a really important part of our climate work. And in fact, our climate policies need to be centered on the goal of social equity. In my work on climate adaptation, I've seen in every single community I've worked in that those who are already struggling financially are more vulnerable to climate impacts and have less to invest financially in getting out ahead of them or cleaning up after they happen. And when historical inequity and racism are added into the mix, it gets even worse. So low-income communities of color or frontline communities are significantly more vulnerable than others and are most likely to get hit, as we say, first and worst by climate change. And so it is critically important that this be right at the heart of our policies. What we've also seen is that one of the very best ways to improve this vulnerability is with family wage jobs. And to the extent that we can have consistent increases in family wage jobs locally, that's a huge part of what we need to do. So as mayor, I would be focusing on job creation with family wage jobs that are moving us forward in terms of our various goals around resilience. I would also be making sure that anything that we put in place in terms of our policies locally had social equity right at the front of it. So how does this program help people who are who have typically been underrepresented, and how do we make sure that they benefit the most and don't bear the brunt of the costs. And I think each program will be a little bit different, but we need to be designing with that in mind as a primary goal.
Thank you.
And I only had 2 things.
I didn't know if you were about to offer a third. The 2 powerful ones are just as wonderful as 3. I accept. Lori, just so I know if I won or failed, can you give us a third tiebreaker poll?
Yes.
My night batting average, I can go to sleep tonight and know how informed I am.
Thank you for asking. And you may have noticed, if people are looking at the chat, that I was corrected on that I didn't have my answer right, but there's a complete answer in there. And this really reinforces for me that next year I have to take the SOCAN Master Climate Protector program, because I would have had that answer right myself. So please read your chat that the methane problem with natural gas is in the transmission and the drilling and the whole process of getting it to your home.
Oh, it's not the releasing it.
And so see, we are really clearly all in this together. So I thank John Lim and then Kathy Conway for a great answer in the chat. And here's your next poll. Hopefully I got this right. If I didn't, somebody better tell me. According to the World Resources Institute, if food waste were a country, not a country we would want to live in, what would be its rank as an emitter of greenhouse gases?
Wow.
Is it 3rd, 8th, 13th, or 18th? We're going to rank food waste as a country in terms of how much greenhouse gases it's emitting. It's just a terrible image.
So if you said 13th, it'd be the 13th largest producer of greenhouse. Is I'm reading that correctly?
As a country in the
Okay.
world, if food waste were a country.
Got it. All right,
Okay.
so we'll put those answers, and then after this final question of the evening, we'll come back to Lori's brilliance. And I love that we got a correction and we learned together. I mean, that's,
I know.
I love this. We
I
don't have to be right. We just have to be trying, right?
We
And then
keep
also
doing this.
acknowledge if we're wrong.
Yeah, I want to keep doing this more often, Barrett.
Yeah. Even if it's just you and I.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, here we go, guys. Last question, please. To our conversation a little bit. Do you think that the use of natural gas should be reduced in Ashland? If yes, how? If no, why not? Tonya, could you tackle this first, please?
Sure. You know, the reality is that we can't hit our targets without transitioning to electricity from natural gas. There are 3 things that we need to be doing on the energy side of climate change work. Well, 3 main ones. There's obviously a variety of others, but we need to conserve energy in all of its forms. We need to switch from fossil fuels to electricity. And then we need to make sure that that electricity is coming from renewable energy sources. And that transition from natural gas to electricity, it has to happen, but we need to do it in a very thoughtful way that recognizes that some people and businesses will be much more severely impacted than others. And so the transition needs to be phased in by implementing a plan that those who are most heavily impacted actually help us design. We need them at the table from the very beginning of this. So we know that restaurants cook with gas stoves, and there are other industries that are likely to have certain processes that are faster and cheaper to do with natural gas. So we need to design the transition in a smart way that recognizes the urgency of it, but also plans so that these companies can make adjustments in the phasing, and they can actually get there with us to the end line. We certainly wouldn't want to put anybody out of business on our way to making this transition. And so that's, you know, it's likely that it involves incentive programs and technical support, but it needs to be phased, and we need to start with the low-hanging fruits and make a real plan that gets us all the way there.
Thank you. Julie?
The short answer is yes. We do not want to encourage LNG projects like Jordan Cove. It won't create sustainable jobs. The claim is that it will. It won't. It's been proven that it won't. It's incredibly damaging to our planet. In addition to methane, it's damaging to our water systems. Gas, however, is a low-cost way for heating homes and cooking, and many low-income people depend on natural gas for heating their homes, and it's cheaper than electric. So we have to be mindful about that. It's especially big, as Councilor Graham said, in commercial kitchens. So we're going to need to help people phase out of natural gas. We're going to have to pick up some of that slack with small and larger scale solar, in my opinion, as part of the electrical grid. And there's some exciting ideas around biofuels, which could also be used as a transition and phase out from natural gas. And I want to be clear here that if you're watching this, you're hearing a lot of the same ideas and the same answers. And I think that's good. That means that we're all on the same page in terms of being champions for our planet. As we've spoken about, there's nothing more important than that right now. We're looking at literally one of the largest mass migrations of human beings in recorded history now as a result of climate change. We've got to be thinking about how we're going to deal with this existential threat. And all of these small ways add up to larger ways. I've been doing that work. I've been doing that social equity work in creating and housing homeless people who don't have enough money for a traditional home. And I've been doing that looking at small ways and large ways to deal with our issues in climate change and having more efficient and planet-friendly energy systems. And I will continue doing that as your mayor.
Thank you, Julie. Lori, do you have some results for us? How did that go?
I do. Our group was very sharp on this one. Very, very sharp. Majority of respondents said third, and that is the correct answer.
Third.
Isn't that a scary country? So it would be third behind China and the US, according to the World Resources Institute.
Food waste.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Before we go into a little allotted time for closing remarks, I just want to thank the candidates so much for your diligence and respect in joining us this evening. The work you put into considering our considerations is so appreciated and apparent. And I think I can speak for most of us when I just say thank you for giving us that time and respect. It's just been an honor to be a small part of this. And also to our participants, once this is up on the Facebook and on the SOCAN website, please share it and post it and help us get it out to as many ears as can hear about it, because I think what the beauty of this moment, this strange time where we can't do this in a room all together, say in a conference room at the university, the beauty of this is the social equity portion of it is that parents who are single parents at home who can't take a night off to go to a mayoral conversation, or people who work when this time would be happening. Because this is recorded and because we're being forced into learning about these things called Zooms and online platforms, we can now share what happened this evening with people that can watch it when they're at home homeschooling their children, when they're on a break from working at these restaurants we're talking about. The social equity portion of this only works, though, if all of us work to get the information out and share the information and enlarge the conversation, like Lori was saying. Let's do this more often. Let's just talk more often. So I thank you in advance to everyone for helping us share this and the other webinars with the Ashland community and the Greater Valley community. Thank you. So finally, we'll just have about 2 minutes apiece for some closing remarks. Things that you didn't have a chance to say or things that you just feel your heart wants to say now. And Julie, if you lead us off, that'd be wonderful.
Certainly, thank you. Prior to coming here, I was reading an account regarding a fire today out at Mohawk, and a person was very nervous about it, understandably, look at what we've been through, and felt that there wasn't appropriate information given. And I really think that's important. Obviously we're talking about climate change. I think everybody who's watching this and who's participating understands that that's the key issue. But underneath that is the safety of our communities. How are we going to do better in terms of communicating? And so I think, first of all, I want to give a shout out to our firefighters. They did a great job. First responders, though, can't be responsible for communications. Chris Chambers is often the public information officer. I think it's too much on his plate. Nixle needs to be updated in real time with the facts of the evacuation, best routes, which are determined by a grid, which I've asked the Transportation Commission to work on, and with the location of where folks should evacuate. Additionally, the city needs to use Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and the city's website to disseminate in real time what's happening. The mayor's office needs to become the war room, with the mayor sending out constant updates and going on camera to inform and reassure. This was my life all day, every day, prior to coming to council. I would do this seamlessly. Communications is vital in these kinds of situations. We got lucky this time. We don't want to rely on luck in the future. We have to get this jammed down and jelly tight. We have to have people informed what's happening in real time, where they need to go, and how they can be safe. Obviously, everything else we've talked about here tonight is very important and crucial, but none of it matters if we don't survive the next fire. So that's job one, and that's what I'm taking on day one.
Thank you, Julie. Tonya?
Thank you. So I first, just as we're closing here, I want to thank everyone who has attended. I know that you're here because you care about this issue and that you're already working on it. And so thank you for taking your time tonight to be part of this conversation. I think it can be too easy to compare our local action against the action of our neighbors or other communities our size, but that would be a mistake. We need to compare ourselves against what needs to be done to stabilize the climate and protect people and natural systems from the impacts that are already underway. And we're living right now in the immediate after impacts of this major fire, but that's a shorter term piece of this. We need to be dealing with those fire impacts as well as the longer term transition of our energy system. And balancing both of those needs is going to be a major part of leadership going forward. And while we're making more progress in some of our other communities, we are not hitting our targets. And we need bold, coordinated, effective action on climate. And we needed it yesterday. So the urgency of the climate crisis is a big part of why I decided to run for council and now for mayor. And as your mayor, I will prioritize making sure that we do our part on climate. And that means working closely with citizen commissions. It means making sure that people with good ideas have access to the council agenda, and that we're engaging with other communities that are doing similar work and speaking out for climate legislation. It also means that making sure that I'm working with the councilors and the other city staff to make sure they understand the urgency. And it comes down at the end of the day to communications and engagement. And it's difficult in an emergency situation because as soon as that emergency gets declared, we are in a different structure. And the people in charge of communicating are our emergency operations center. And as an elected official, we can help with that process, but it is driven by the fire department, the police department, and public works. And with our emergency management, with our city manager at the head of that. But we can do a much better job than what we did this last time around. And it means making some structural changes, but that's a big part of it because that's also how we communicate what needs to be done on climate in general. And so as your mayor, I would be very dedicated to making sure that people know what they need to do in an emergency and also what they need to do in general on climate change.
Thank you, Tonya. Thank you, Julie. I'm going to wrap this up here, but as I do, I want to open up the chat room to something we did during the City Council webinar, which is I'd like everybody in the participants and our panelists can do this too. The exercise is you're standing down in the plaza or any part of Ashland, anywhere in the valley you want to imagine, and it's 20 years from today, in September, 2040. And you're looking around at the unbelievable, wonderful things that have happened in this town that you can't even believe that the world shifted to this positive future. And I just opened up the chat room to just list a few of the things you see. It can be as small to the smile of a child to as big as a solar farm, right? So anything that you see, could you just list that in the chat room? And even after I sign us off, we're going to keep the webinar open for you to not only add those things to the chat room while some music plays, but also you can scroll through and read other people's things that they see 20 years from now. So we'll keep that open for a while afterwards. You don't have to worry about desperately scrolling through. So that concludes our discussion for this evening. And again, thanks to the candidates for your diligence and your kindness and your passion for making this community bright and ebullient heading into the future. Thank you, Lori, for your leadership in making this happen. Thank you, SOCAN, for the work you do every day. And thank you all the participants who are here live and all of you who are watching online later in the recording and all you do for the community. And that's us for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.